Hey guys, this is Response for NerdStomper.com. Today we're going to be going over some Protoss safe expansion builds for each matchup. These builds should allow you to defend against any early attacks and get an expo up quickly as well. The first build we will be looking at is a 3-gate Robo PVZ. This build is a bit more safe than the 3-gate at defending those early roach attacks and allows you to put pressure on the Zerg if need be, while getting up in early expansion. Now first things first, I'm going to be building my first pylon at my ramp. With this pylon, we are going to be walling off the ramp to protect from any Zergling run-bys or pressure that might occur. My gateway goes down at around 13 or 14 supply. This is to keep up with any economic Zerg builds while still preparing for the 6 pool, which comes very quickly. As soon as you scout the 6 pool, throw down a forge and pylon to finish your wall. It's important to continue chrono boosting workers because you will be ahead of them in economy and be able to continue your build without worrying about any further Zergling aggression. Here's my scouting probe. I sent him out after I built my first pylon. Now the first purpose of this probe is to scout the 6 pool and to block his expansion. It's very important that you scout early on to see which route the Zerg is going, because these builds are going to translate into where I spin my chrono boost. If I see no expansion, and no attempt at one, he might be trying to do a roach all in, so that means I'll have to get warp gate up as soon as possible. If he does try to expand, then I can safely chrono boost probes. This pylon here blocks his expansion. It is crucial that you put down that pylon if you don't see his gas in early pool with your probe. This way he is forced into delaying his expansion for as long as it takes him to kill the pylon. That's a crucial 20 to 30 seconds or even more. Let's take a close look at how to wall in correctly. Ideally, if you're going for a quick wall, we want to wall in with a pylon as well. However, this type of block is much less effective against banelings due to the low health of the pylon. It also makes the structures solely powered by this pylon very vulnerable. If we place the pylon back, with the power grid just touching the edge of the ramp, we can place 2 structures, the gateway and cybercore, to form a much higher hit point wall. And there's one space that is perfect for a zealot block. This way as well, the pylon powering those buildings is much less vulnerable to attack. Now back to the game. Right after I get my core, I get a zealot. After my core finishes, I get a sentry early, then my warp gate research. Early on, we will be getting a lot of sentries because they use gas and in turn free up minerals, as well as providing a good defensive base to expand from. Force fields can hold off any type of bust early on. Also, we want to get these sentries early so they will be full energy when we move out to pressure. The 2nd and 3rd gateways go down right as I can afford them at around 29 supply or so. As you can see, I'm playing really defensively, trying to set up myself for a good macro game. Generally, you want to get the robotics facility out before your expansion to help defend against any 1 or 2 base roach rushes that the Zerg can do. You want it out early to get an ops and to start a mortal production as well, because it can be really hard to defend against any roach rushes early on with only 3 gates. I like getting hallucination as well right after warp gate is done because it allows you free scouting into his base with fake phoenixes.
And notice while I'm pushing out here, I'm expanding. I'm putting a little pressure on, and you always want to do this, is put a slight amount of pressure on the Zerg, kind of scout around. Notice I'm getting an overlord kill here, while I'm just able to expand myself. Now I have this observer coming, I have hallucination just about done, and I'm set up for a nice little mid game here. I've got my expansion up, I'm pretty safe, I've got a lot of sentries, and I'm even able to put some offensive pressure on him quite easily here, able to kill a couple overlords. So this is really, really key here. Remember that you can put this aggression on if you think your opponent's just been really, really drone heavy. If you don't see a lot of... Now, I will say this can be a little dangerous if you do see him building a lot of units early. If, like, say if I saw roaches outside my base, there'd be no reason for me to push out. But this push out here was to force him to build drones. Now I'm just going to walk all the way back to my base and be fine. I got my expansion up. I'm going to be sending my hallucination scouts out very soon, and I'm going to be sending my ops scout out very soon.
Now with those extra units he made, he'll try and attack, but the sentry and their force fields are so good against links, I only lose 1 unit here. I've got my expansion up and I'm ready to start making a bunch of units and responding to whatever I scout for. It's important to note though that if I saw the Zerg making roaches, I wouldn't have been so aggressive early on. However, you want to make sure they aren't just droning up either, and put pressure on them if they are. Now let's take a look at the Protoss vs Terran matchup. We're going to be looking at the 1-gate robo into expand and how to deal with any early aggression against Terran, such as Marines, Marauders, or Banshees. Against Terran, you have to be very defensive in the early stages of the game. Protoss plays much stronger in the later game when they can get all of their strong attacking units such as Colossus and High Templar. In the early game, they have to play more defensive, using force fields with sentries to do most of the defending. Terrans have many different options against Protoss in the early to mid stages of the game. They can do any type of medevac play, they can go Banshee harassment, they can do any type of early Marine and Marauder rush off of one base as well. They also have the ability to pull off a fast expansion if they so desire. As usual, after 9 pylon, we will be getting a gateway at either 13 or 14. This build is fine for every matchup except for Protoss versus Protoss. With this build, we always want to be chrono boosting out probes. Never stop building probes because you need that economic edge to safely expand in this matchup. Gas and a second pylon go down at normal times. Then I'll be throwing down my cybernetics core as soon as my gateway finishes. Now with this build, we will be scouting for their second gas timing, as well as any cheese they throw at us. Now on a 4-player map, you generally want to scout closest to you first because you want to know if they're very close rush distances. After this, especially on a map like Lost Temple, it's good to scout both Xel'Naga towers to see if you can catch a glimpse of any SCVs or any proxy barracks in the middle of the map. Now my probe arrives in his base and I scout 2 refineries very early, along with a very fast factory and a reactor. This allows me to know that he's going very fast tech to either Banshee or Raven. With this information, I will be chrono boosting out stalkers to be able to put some pressure on the Terran while expanding behind that. In most cases, I'd get my robo before my expansion, but since I got such a good scout in the first time, I'm just going to go ahead and expand before my robo in this game. Now you'll notice me scouting the outskirts of my base for any proxy factories in my base. This is a not too common strategy, but can occur sometimes, and it's always better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to PvT. Now you'll notice me poking up with my first stalker here. I'm trying to get an idea of what his unit composition is, and if I can get a Marine kill or 2. In this case, he's well defended with 6 Marines, but it's always better to check to see if he is being really light on the Marines, because a lot of times you can do a lot of damage with these early stalkers. Now notice I'm retreating with my stalkers, but leaving my probe at the Xel'Naga tower here. This will give me a lot of scouting information that I really need if I'm going to be taking an expansion this early. Notice I move another probe out to the second Xel'Naga tower here. This will allow me another advanced warning in case he does move out. So I notice with my probe that he is pushing out with a big group of Marines here. I'd say about 10 or 11 at this point in the game. So that's a lot of Marines really early on. To defend against this early Marine pressure, I'm going to be warping in nothing but stalkers and chrono boosting my warp gates. The stalkers have a 1 range advantage and also have a speed advantage. So with good micro, you can handle early Marine pressure like this fairly easily. I'm moving out my stalkers to meet the Marines in the middle of the map. You want to meet them in the middle of the map to give yourself as much room as possible to micro away from the Marines. At this point, I'm going to be trying to delay him as much as possible from killing my expansion with my stalkers moving up and down the ramp. I know that I need just a little bit more time until my 3 other gateways finish. Once they finish, I'll be able to warp in many more stalkers and deal with this pressure rather easily. In this game, I felt like this was a good time to pull probes, as he had lost all of his SCVs, and if I could get a good surround in on the Marines, his Marines would die rather quickly. Although I do lose many probes in this engagement, I know I have a second Nexus up, and he's lost many SCVs himself, so I'm still economically ahead. At this point in the game, I'm in a strong economic lead heading into the mid-game. He's lost a lot of SCVs and a lot of Marines. He's also spent a lot of money on bunkers that just went down. So basically at this point in the game, I'm going to be building a couple observers, and defending my bases from any further Banshee harassment that can come along. Dealing with Banshee harassment involves preemptive planning. Keeping stalkers and observers behind each mineral line on the outskirts of the mineral line will allow your stalkers to get in range of the Banshees before they can get any harassment on those probes at all. Lastly, we will be taking a look at the Protoss 4-gate, how to correctly execute it, and how to do it defensively. You don't always have to do a 4-gate aggressively. With good scouting, you can pretty much pull ahead, or at least stay equal to your opponent, even if he doesn't do a 4-gate. There's a lot of different transitions out of 4-gate. You can go Blink Stalker, Colossus, Void Ray, Dark Templar, or even Fast Expand. But I'd say the most safe opening build order in PvP is definitely the 4-gate. So you see me opening with 9 pylons. You pretty much have to open 9 pylon in every single game you play, unless you're deciding to cheese. I'm scouting after my pylon because I want to know if I'm being cannon rushed, proxy gated, Those type of early aggressions require me to scout right after my pylon. It is important to build your gateway at 12 supply because it allows you to get a faster warp gate. And if you see him building out an early zealot and chrono boosting it out, you can safely defend against any early pushes that he might throw at you, if his gateway was a 10 gate. If I do scout him going a 10 gate, I should first check his gas to see if he keeps mining from it. If he only mines slightly then pulls probes, it's pretty obvious he's going Korean 4 gate, which requires me to match him in gateways much earlier than usual and take probes off gas myself. Notice I do still have probes being chrono boosted here. We are both scouting each other out early on. In PvP, it is critical to get as much scouting information as possible so you can respond correctly. Nice. Since he is building his second gateway early, I want to put down my second gateway slightly after his to defend against any early pushes. My third and fourth gateways are added early on, as well as an early sentry, which helps for any defense. Notice right when my core finishes, I start chrono boosting out my warp gate upgrade. You want to get this upgrade out as fast as you possibly can, or you'll quickly fall behind in units. Early unit composition is very important in PvP. If you go with too many zealots early on, you will easily be kited by a mainly stalker force. But if you go with too many stalkers, you won't have the zealot numbers to tank damage from their stalkers. Generally, you want your first set of warp-ins to be all stalkers, then the second set to be all zealots. After this, you should adjust your unit composition to best match your opponents. Scouting is another very important aspect of Protoss vs. Protoss. Keeping a probe at the Zeldnaga tower is critical because it gives you those extra few seconds you need if he pushes out to attack. The standard 4-gate rush comes at about 6 minutes, so I need to have the forces to deal with 6 stalkers and 1 zealot by 6 minutes into the game. If my standard opening doesn't provide the necessary units to defend this rush, I would consider it unsafe, especially on the ladder. Since I had a probe out on the map, I was able to sneak it in his base. This is something you should be doing every game. Scouting your opponent's base often can lead to running into an open main and getting great scouting information, as would happen in this game. Notice when I get in his main, I scout 3 gates in a row while building. This notifies me of his build and allows me to be aggressive with my 4 gate. By scouting his build, it allows me to plan a correct response. In this case, he has less gateways. I can be confident in putting pressure on him. I can lay a pylon below his natural expansion and warp units into his base. If I hadn't gotten this scout in his base, I would not be moving out. Instead, I would be teching to Robo and getting an Obs to decide my tech route. Another way to go about responding to the early Robo by him would be to throw down an Expo and using force fields to hold off any pressure while getting a Robo of my own, soon after heading straight up to Colossus. At this point, with having the 4 gates, I have complete control of how the game progresses, which is a great position to be in. I hope this gives you an idea of how standard PvP plays with an early defensive 4 gate. Thanks for watching. This has been Response for NerdStomper.com.